Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 1 of my Android development tutorial. I'm going to do something really crazy in this tutorial. I am going to cover a vast majority of all the different files and all the different things that go into creating an Android application. And if you don't have the Android development kit installed, I have a link to that in the upper left-hand corner. And as this tutorial continues, in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to have a playlist that's going to have all my Android tutorials available all in one space. And I'm going to cover this both in a presentation format as well as writing a ton of code and explaining everything all along the way. So I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Now the very first thing I'm going to do here is, of course, I'm going to create a new Android project, and I'm just going to go new. I'm going to come over to Android Application Project, and if you don't see that there, you can scroll down, come into Other, and I'll just do it this way. And then in the window that pops up, you can come here under the Android folder and click on Android Application Project. And since this is our first app, I'm going to call this my first app. And then I'm going to come in here and give this a name so we don't have any conflicts. I'm going to use my website, of course. Just like we did before, click Next. Don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Click Next. There's the icon. Click Next. Just let it be blank activity again. Click Next. And then we're going to talk about MainActivity and Activity Main and all the things they do, and click Finish. And that is going to build all these different configuration files and set everything up for you so that you will be able to start writing some code. Now I'm going to go step by step through what all of these folders and all these files do. Okay, so the first thing you got here is a source folder, and this is just going to hold all of the class files for your app. Then you have your gen folder, and this is going to contain 2 auto-generated files that you should never touch. This is a basic configuration file, and this is RJava. RJava provides access to all the different resources that you need inside of your application. And in your application, each resource is going to have a very specific ID, and all those IDs are going to be located here. So don't touch these 2 guys. Then we have our assets folder. It's going to contain text files, databases, and all the other different types of data files that you're going to need for your application. That brings us down to the libs folder or library folder, and this is just going to have the Android support version v4 API available for us so that we will be able to develop using the newest API while remaining completely backwards compatible to all the other previous versions of Android. Then you're going to have your resources folder, which I'm going to cover on the next couple slides. Jump over into bin. It's going to contain all the files that are going to be built by the ADT, and it's also going to contain your actual app stored as an APK file or an application package file. And this is just the file format used for installing apps on the Android OS. Then we're going to get into the Android manifest.xml file, which I'm going to cover in great detail. It's going to have the app name, the app icon, activities that you're going to use, permissions that are going to be required for your app to properly operate. And at some point inside of it, you're going to see Android intent action main. This is going to define the entry point for your app. And that brings us into the resources folder. All these drawable folders that you see here, drawable, 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 they are going to store images that you're going to need for different resolutions depending upon if it's going to show up on an Android phone, an Android tablet, an Android TV, or whatever. And you can also see here where we're going to have small screens and the resolution they're going to work on, normal screens and the resolutions they're going to work on, large screens and extra large screens. And as you can see here, we even have extra large screens. And the only thing that's in here right now are all the different icons that are going to be used to represent your app on all these different devices. Then we're going to get into the layout folder. This is going to contain all the files that define the app's user interface. And there's mainly going to be 4 different ways you're going to be able to lay out your application inside of activity main.xml. And like I said before, this is just an XML file that's going to allow you to define the layout you want to use. And we're going to have the relative layout, which is going to place elements relative to other elements. And you can just think of this as left of whatever element or below whatever element. And you're also going to be able to align to the parent element, such as align to the bottom of the parent or right of center inside of a parent. Then we're going to have our linear layout, and it's going to align all elements in one direction, either vertically or horizontally. And of course, a vertical list will have only one element per row, no matter how wide it might be, while a horizontal list is only going to have one element per column. And we're going to be working a lot with linear layout in this tutorial, so you're going to get to see that. Then you're going to have the grid layout, which lays out elements in a series of rows and columns and it's very flexible. And if you plan on using a grid layout, of course, you should set it up using the layout editor rather than going in and trying to mess around with XML. And then finally, we have the absolute simplest layout manager, which is the frame layout. And what it basically does, as new elements are added, they are basically just stacked on top of each other. So let's take a look at Activity Main a little bit closer. So you can see inside of here, Activity Main opens up whenever you first create your app. And I'm just going to step through here briefly and cover some of these different things. You're going to notice inside of Android, we're going to use things like match parent for things like width and things like height, and also wrap content down here for width and height. And we're going to do that rather than using exact pixels so that our interface is able to easily scale up to fit the different types of devices we want to run our app on. Now, if we come over here, you're going to see a folder called values, and there's going to be a whole bunch of important little files inside of here, one of which is going to be dimensions. And inside of dimensions, we're going to have things like padding, and DP, 16 DP in this situation, is going to stand for density independent of pixels. Again, everything's built off the idea of being able to properly scale up the app regardless of the type of device that it's going to be running on. And in this situation, DP relative to a 160 DPI dots per inch screen would equal 1 density independent pixel. So don't worry about that, and if I haven't mentioned it before, please don't try to memorize all this stuff right now. This is meant to just sort of show you everything, allow you to digest as much as you can possibly digest, and then in the following tutorials I'm going to cover everything in much more detail. I just want to give you a brief explanation of what's going on in all these files. Then we're going to get into strings.xml. Open that guy up right there. And all of the strings that you're going to be storing to use inside of your app are going to be both stored as well as retrieved from strings.xml. And you're going to be able to define some simple formatting inside of here, such as if you want the text to be bold or italic or underlined, just like HTML. And the only thing you really have to worry about whenever you're defining these strings is to make sure that you escape all your apostrophes as well as your quotes. And you can see right here exactly how we're going to define one of our strings. We're going to give it a name, app name, and then here the actual string that we're going to store inside of it. And as you're going to see here in a little bit, let me just give you a little bit of space, you're going to be able to pull all of this information out of the strings.xml file into your interface by going Android text is equal to @ string / and then whatever the name is for this string stored inside of here. And you're going to see a bunch of examples of exactly how that's going to operate here in a second. And then that brings us into styles.xml, and we're not going to do that much with this part of this app, but we'll definitely be getting into it much later on. And inside of styles.xml, you're going to define the format basically for your UI. So you're going to be able to specify properties such as height and padding and font color, font size, background color, and a whole bunch of other different things in a way that is very similar to how you style things using cascading style sheets. And that is just a basic run through of all the different folders and all the different things they contain. And as you can see over here, inside of values, you're going to have different dimensions as well stored inside of here. And I'm going to get more into Android Manifest here in a second and all these other different guys as we create a simple app. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into activity_main.xml and start playing around inside of here. Now, by default, this guy is going to use a relative layout. Well, I don't want to use a relative layout, so I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to create everything custom and explain everything as I go along. Instead, we're going to use a linear layout. And like I said before, it's going to align elements in one direction. And we're going to be able to define that by setting a value to orientation to either horizontal or vertical. And whenever you define this, you are, of course, going to have to define a root view. And this root view is going to fill the device's screen. So we're going to go linear layout, which is what we want to use. And I actually shouldn't have deleted all that. Let's just get back here, getting a little bit crazy. And let's just get rid of relative and go linear layout. And we're going to be able to keep a lot of these things all exactly the same. Except in this situation, I'm not going to worry about any of this padding. And I'm going to get rid of tools down here. And like we said before, width is going to be defined with match parent. And height is going to be defined with match parent so that it properly scales to different devices. And the only thing we're going to need to do here with a linear layout is define the orientation, whether it's going to be horizontal or vertical. And to do that, we're going to go Android orientation. So I might as well just click on that, save ourselves some time. And I'm going to go horizontal, right like that. And there we go. Now what we're going to do with our app here is we're going to want to define it. And I'll of course come down here and make sure this is set for linear as well. Otherwise that'll throw a hissy. Okay, got that set up. Now what we're going to do here is this is basically pulled from the Google tutorial that is provided, and I just really liked it. And no, I'm not going to be obsessing on only the Google tutorial. I'm going to be pulling on all kinds of applications as we go along. But what we want to do is basically provide the option for an editable text field to be shot onto the screen. The user is going to be able to type in some sort of information into that, hit a button, and then that's going to trigger an intent or an action to cause another activity to be started. When that other activity is going to be very simple, it's just going to print out on the screen whatever the user typed into this text field. But to type something into the text field, we're going to actually have to create a text field for them to be able to type into. And to create an editable text field, we're going to have to use a tag called edit text, and we're just going to go Android, and we're going to give this an ID. And whenever you are going to be defining an ID for all of your different elements, which of course you're going to always have to do, because we're going to need a way to be able to reference these different elements inside of your app code, which is going to be in your source folder. You're going to have to put an @ symbol in here because that is always going to be used to refer to an object inside of XML. Then whenever you are first creating a new resource, you're going to have to put a plus sign followed by ID. And you're only going to use this plus sign whenever you first create a resource, of course. And then you're just going to put a slash and whatever you want its name to be. And I'm just going to have it set for edit message. Now let's say that we want our app and the layout for our text field to completely fill a row inside of it. And all we're going to have on this, of course, is going to be a text field where they're going to be able to enter information and a button. Well, let's say that we want to have as much space available given to our text field so that they can type in a long message. How you would do that is you'd go Android, layout, and give a value to weight. Now weight by default is always going to be 0 for anything that you would create in regards to a resource inside of an Android app. So by giving it a value of 1, that means that this text field you're going to create is going to take up all the space that is not taken up by the button. And if you actually created 2 different elements, and let's say we gave our text field a value of 2, and then whenever we created our button we gave it a value of 1, it would actually give 2/3 of all the space to our text field, and then the 1/3 remaining part to our button. But if we don't do anything, it's going to make the button as big as it needs to be and give the text field all the other different space that is available to it. Now, a very important thing to do whenever you are trying to get a text field to size itself properly is whenever we're going to be defining the width for our element, we're going to go layout, width, and we want to make sure that we set this to 0 dpi. And the reason why we're doing that is layout width is going to be irrelevant because the weight has already been set, and weight is going to fill all the space that's available for this little text box we're going to put in here. So then we're going to go Android, layout, height, and in this situation, because we want everything to just properly scale height-wise, regardless of the type of device it's using, we're going to just type in wrap content. And then finally, we're going to go Android, hint is equal to string, edit, message. And this is going to pull a string from strings.xml that is going to be used by default. And then, of course, make sure that that's closed off. Now let's jump over into strings.xml and actually define edit message, because it's going to say here there's an error because this resource you're looking for doesn't exist. So I'm just going to copy this guy, copy, jump over into strings.xml real quick, and you can see all these different things here. I'll paste that in there, and then I'm just going to create myself a new one of these guys. So throw that there, grab edit message, throw that right there, and then I'm going to find the default string that I want to be shown inside of there. Let's just say it's enter a message. And there we go. Now we're going to be able to pull these directly out of here. And the reason why we're doing this, aside from the fact that we want to make everything scalable and translatable and such, is that it's going to be really great to store all the text for your user interface all in one area. And the reason why that's going to be great is you're going to be able to manage all of the text across your entire app all in one place. So that's just a couple of different reasons why we're actually using strings.xml, and that's the reason why Android's set up that way. And of course, there's no reason why you can't come in here and change any of these things. So I can put first app inside of here. And another thing we're going to do is define the text that we want to show up on our button. So we're going to come in here and go button send, for example, and then type send in here. There we go. And for now, we can basically just let everything else stand. So let's jump back into Activity Main and continue playing around with this. So, of course, we're going to need to create a button to use with our interface. And to create a button, you're just going to go button. Pretty simple. And then inside of this, we're also going to define our button so that it just fits inside of here. So we're going to go wrap content for both of these guys, both the width as well as the height. We're of course going to want to get the text from strings.xml so that we can put our text on our button. And to do that, we're just going to go text is equal to @string, and we called it button send. So that's going to do that. And then the final thing we want to do is set it up so that we can call an action to occur whenever the button is clicked. And we're going to call a method that is going to be named send message whenever this button is indeed clicked. Then we want to close that off, of course. So that is how to set up strings.xml as well as activity main. So let's file save all those different guys. And I'm not going to need dimensions.xml, so I'm going to close that, and I'm also not going to need styles.xml at this time. I'm going to cover those at a later date. Now to actually start making this app do things, I'm going to go into source and go into MainActivity.java. And there is this guy. There's all the different things we need to import to make it work properly. Now the very first thing I'm going to want to do inside here is, because we're going to be sending a message from one of our activities or screens that we're going to be working with into another activity or screen that we're going to be working with, I'm going to store a unique message inside of this guy, and it's going to be public final static. It's going to be a string, and I'm going to call this extra message. And here I'm going to use my package name to avoid any conflicts that might occur with other apps. So I'm going to go com.newthinktank. Of course, you would use whatever your own domain is, and I can call this my first app.message. This is just going to be the message we're going to be passing from one activity that we have into another activity. And I'm not going to worry that much about all these different methods right here. But I am going to have to define the method that we talked about in activity main called send message. This needs to be created so that it can be called whenever our button's clicked. So we're going to bounce down inside of here and create send message. So to do that, we're just going to go public void send message view. And like I said before, this is going to be triggered whenever the button is clicked. And you're going to get a little error here that we need to import a library. No problem, import view. Okay, so the next thing we have to do after we create this is we need to create an intent. And of course, we're going to have to import another library. No problem, did that. Now, an intent is an object that can be used to start another activity. And to create an intent, we just go new intent, type in this. And what this is just a reference to main activity. This guy right here. That's what this is a reference to. And if you want to really understand the ins and outs of this, main activity is, of course, an activity. As you can see here, extends activity. And meanwhile, activity is also an extension of another class that is called a context. And a context can represent various different application-specific resources inside of your application. And in essence, the reason why everything is structured this way is so that all these different resources can gain access to each other, because they're going to have shared methods that are all going to be inherited because they are part of the ultimate context class. Now, once again, if you didn't quite understand that, don't worry about it. We're going to cover this stuff numerous times throughout the course of this tutorial, and by the end you will get it. So then what we're in essence doing here is saying that we want to call display message activity. That is our intention. And it is our intention to have this guy executed whenever send message is called. And send message is called whenever the button is pressed inside of our application. Now, whenever all this goes down, what we want to do is create a text area and place it in our new view for our new activity. And to do that, we're going to go edit text, and this is going to give us another error because we need to import another library, of course, because we always have to do that. So let's just do that right away. And then there's going to have to be a cast to type edit text setup here. And then we just want to go find view by ID. And this is just going to create a text area and place it in our view. And remember, whenever I said before, our Java, this guy over here, which is stored in the generated Java files file, this guy has all the IDs for all the different resources. So what we're going to do is go r.id.edit message to get a hold of the ID for this guy. We'll get rid of that, of course. There we go. Got that set up right. And what is edit message? Of course, jump over into this guy, and you're going to see that edit message is this guy stored right here in the edit text field that we're going to be able to create here in a second. So all I'm doing is passing this information around. So then I want to be able to store that text inside of my text area. And to do that, I'm going to create a new string called message, and then I'm going to go edit text, and I want to get the text from that field that they entered in there previously. And we're going to go to string, of course, to convert it into a string. So all I'm doing is this guy over here, wherever I had the area for the user to be able to enter in a message inside of it, I'm getting the ID from the r.java file, right like I have right here. I'm storing it inside of this edit text field. And then here what I'm doing is extracting that text from the edit text field and storing it in a string called message. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Now what I want to do is I have my intent, which is my intention to call display message activity, this class up here. And what I want to do inside of this intent is to put extra information in it to be passed over. That extra information can be stored in extra message, and the actual message itself is going to be this string right here. So that's what's going to be sent over there whenever display message activity is needed. And then all I need to do to get display message activity, this activity to show up on the screen, is to go start activity and pass along the intent or intention to start that activity along with the message that is going to be used inside of it. So now what I need to do is actually create display message activity, this class. Everything else here is perfectly fine, so you can file save that. Now to create a new activity, what I'm going to do is zoom up here, come up to this little guy here, click on new, and in this situation you're going to have to scroll down inside of here until you get to other. This box is going to open up, and of course we're making a new activity, a new screen to show. So I'm going to just double click on that. Let blank activity just be set because we're just making a real simple little app here. And then under project, I'm just going to let this be set to my first app. The activity name, of course, is going to be display message activity, just like we did before. We can let this all be set exactly the same. We could come in here and type in something like my message for the title of this guy. Under hierarchical parent, because I don't want to have any conflicts, I'm going to select that guy. And then I'm just going to go to this guy right here, my first app, and double click on that. So there we go, got that all set up. Navigation type, I'm going to let that set for none. And then I'm going to come down here. We can click on next if we want. Don't really need to worry about any of this. Let's just click finish. And there we go. Now whenever we do that, activity display message is going to open up inside of here. And another thing that's going to be inside of here is in the source folder. This is where you want to actually work. Inside of this source folder, you're going to see display message activity. This is going to be the code that you're actually going to want to work with. Let's open this up so we can see all our different libraries we have. We're not going to need to change anything here. Okay, so now with onCreate, this guy's going to be called whenever our new activity is created. So what are we going to need to do? Well, we want to actually get the message that was entered into the app. So we're going to have to create a new intent like this. And we're going to store inside of it the information that was passed over into this, which was actually the intention to call display message activity. And of course, come in here and get this library. Now, if we want to actually get this string that was stored inside of the intent, we're going to go string message is equal to get that message, go intent, get string extra, and to get it, go main activity, because that's its name, and extra message. And there we go. And where did that main activity come from? Right here. And where did that message come from? Right here. This is it, extra message. So that's how we're pulling that information in. That's what that means. So now we're going to need to create our new text view where we're going to display this message. So we're going to go text view. I'm going to call it text view is equal to new text view. Type this inside of there because that's what this is, this activity. Of course, come in here again, get that library. I can also come in here and set my text size, just 40 points inside of there. Then inside of this new text area, if I want to set my text inside of it with the message that was passed over from the intent, I'm just going to go text view dot set text and pass the message inside of it. Now that I have that all set up, now I have to come in here to set content view and just put my little text view on the Android device. And if I save that, the neat thing that's going to happen is display message is actually going to be created automatically for me inside of here. And I can run this guy. So just come up inside of here, hit run configurations, make sure I have my first app, MainActivity, selected here with launch. Go over into target. Make sure I have automatically pick compatible device and have my emulator all set up like I did before. And then come in here and hit run. And here the emulator is starting up. I can see down here that my application has been installed on my device. And all I need to do is open it up. And here we can see enter first message. And I can put just random message, just whatever I want to put. Come over here, hit send. And random message gets printed out on the screen. So there is how to do 50 million different things with Android. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm anybody. I just wanted to try to do a completely different type of Android tutorial. In upcoming tutorials, I'm just going to make a ton of apps. That's all I'm going to do, and I'm going to explain everything along the way. Please leave any questions or comments below. Otherwise, till next time.